Welcome to the Occult Rejects. You already know what time it is. You hit that play button if you're listening to the audio, or you already saw what the title is on the video. So it's story time with Roby Marx, and we will be talking about Adonis and a little bit of maybe Aphrodite too. But before we introduce Robbie, we're going to introduce the other rejects. I got my man, the Headless Giant, with me again. What is going on, sir? How are you?
How's it going? If you just came over from our stream, you know I love Roby Marx's story time, and so I'm back again. I'm ready to hear about Adonis. You can email me your occult/esoteric/strange dream stories at the Headless Giant at podcast@gmail.com, and we will get those right out to the. Oh, also, if you include your address, Nick will send you some stickers. So send me those emails. Tell me about your strange experiences, and we'll get that up to you every Thursday.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Throw in that address, and I'll throw you 8 stickers. Keep it magical like the magician. All right. So, my man, Tyrone, what is going on, sir? How are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm glad to be here. Like, as always, you know, I'm always here for the knowledge and gaining the wisdom from other people. They always say the gray hair is wisdom. And I'm seeing a lot of gray hair there right now. So I'm going to get me a lot of knowledge today. So I'm glad to be here. Everything you can find on me is on my website, rebirthoftheword.com. I also wrote a best-selling book, Journey Through the Origins of History, and it's on Amazon right now. I appreciate that, Nick.
Of course, hell yeah. Thank you for coming on, man. I love that. And my man, Roby Marx. I know it's been a minute since you've been on, and we have gotten some new followers since then. So please let everybody know what's up with Roby Marx and where they can find all your amazing work and your art, please.
Yeah, I'm an artist, and I do a lot of research. I do concert, festival posters, mom and pop barbecue, just any kind of anything. As far as for art, I'm pretty much an artist for hire, and I just got back from the road, so I've been kind of going through this information and getting it all together. But if you want to check out my other stuff, you can go check out my Linktree, which is Linktree RMARX, and that'll pull up everything for me as far as my Patreon, my Instagram, my Twitter, my podcast, the MetaMindcast. If you want to check that out, we got a couple years of backlog, shows you can check out on various subjects, and yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Robbie, for coming back on. I know this is kind of like, I think for you, it's been a continuation since you did like Sybil and Addis, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess what was it that took you to want to cover Adonis? And then I guess we can get into it.
What took me to what?
To actually start, covering Adonis like this. So looking
into this yeah. Way. So, when you initially I just go through all these ancient texts, and I found this thread of Nimrod that I found really interesting as far as him becoming the first skinwalker. And then that kind of goes because Nimrod, he basically was the first one to train leopards and cheetahs to do hunting. And so he would wear this leopard skin, which you see continuing in the Phrygian schools, in the schools of Adonis, moving into Greece with Dionysus and transforming into Bacchus. So and even the skin in Greece is called, I think it's called Nymar, which means to weep, which is a reference to Nimrod in regard to the mourners and the weepers within these various mystery school occults. When the God man would die, they would weep and basically pound their chest, pull out their hair until the God was risen. So this is like this continuing mystery school system that's kind of moving through Egypt, coming out of ancient Sumer with Ishtar and Nana, moving into Mother Kybele, moving into Adonis and Aphrodite as well.
Well, it's all centered around Thrace, right? So it's this upper part of Turkey that is sort of giving you the Phrygians, giving you, and that's sort of like the bridge between worlds, because Thrace is right between the continental divide between East and West. So this is all sort of right in there.
Right, and the Canaanites, they had kind of been assimilated by this line of Hamites that came down and became the Phoenicians. So basically, you have these mystery schools because when you trace Ham back, the line of Ham going to Cush and Ham and Nimrod, or Ham and Cush and Nimrod, this is basically some of the beginnings of, because it was what was it, Ham that actually brought the worship of the gods from Ethiopia into Egypt and started setting up, and and you can kind of see these stretching back. I mean, far before the recorded history we have statuary that kind of goes way back 12,000, 40,000 years of some of these goddess figurines. So it's kind of this continuing thing. And when you get into Isis, in several inscriptions, she talks about, she's the daughter of Saturn. Osiris was the son of Saturn. So this gets into the Saturnian mystery kind of school, that is this death and resurrection kind of cult. And after the initial, fall of this God man and resurrection, this cult started to spread, like we were talking about, from Phrygia into Syria, into Cyprus, coming into Greece, bringing these temple builders. These temple builders were also a big part of that, and we're going to get into some of that as well here too. So
absolutely. One of my favorite examples that really sort of exemplifies this whole thing is there was a contest between Egypt and Phrygia to see who was more ancient. And so you had this Egyptian ruler decide that he was going to isolate these children. And the first language that they spoke would indicate whether or not they were, which was the first language. And so this is where I get the connection to Kubaba, because Kubaba kind of sounds like baby talk, right? And so who won? It wasn't the Egyptians, it was the Phrygians.
The Phrygians,
According to this ancient Egyptian sort of experiment, it was the Phrygian language that was older.
And that Kumbaba is where you get into the Kumbari cycle, or the Kumbaba cycle of this. It's one of the first castrated godmen, that is actually what the Greek Titomancy was entirely based on, which came out of this region of Turkey. So, basically that whole story of the Titans and, all of that kind of is from this Kumbaba. And there's a huge argument when you get into a lot of these ancient texts about what language was first, whether it was Syriac or whether it was Hebrew. So, it's interesting, just the dialogue you get from a lot of these old rhetoricians. So, yeah. So
then
now...
we find...
Go ahead.
Well, and then we find the, the ancient site in Turkey that's supposed to be the oldest in the world. And it's like, hey, guys, there's a big connection here, go back to Tempe.
Yeah. And that was they call it Enki's calendar, which directly ties into, the
Sumerians.
The Sumerians.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that about Enki's calendar and
Gobekli Tepe.
What else do they call it? No, the Enki calendar in South Africa, the one that's older than Gobekli Tepe. They have it's called the Adam's calendar / Enki's calendar.
Yeah. And Enki, there's a lot of analogy that can be made with Cush, tying in with Nimrod. Basically, because the Bible talks about that the line of Nimrod basically took over all of Shinar. So it was like
Shinar, Sumar,
Sumar, yeah. And that Shinar, in the text, it says that, the Shinar means where they were shaken out is what it means. Then it's basically where they say after the flood, all of the bodies got washed in there. And so it's just this giant bone field of decomposition. I mean, I imagine it would be verdant and green, but that's where they built the Tower of Babel, was on this giant decomposing bone field, there in Shinar. So, but yeah, so let's get back over into Syria, and we'll start talking about Aphrodite and Adonis, right? So now Theopompus, circa 300 BC, he says the Western people consider and call the winter to be Kronos, the summer to be Aphrodite, and the spring to be Proserpine. And they believe that all things come into being by Kronos and Aphrodite. So here we have Saturn, Kronos, and then you have Aphrodite, pleasure, love, depending on how you want to look at it, the heavenly goddess per se, as Plato would say. And, you know, all things, and this is where, you know, you get Mother Rhea coming in with the sickle, you know, and the castration and kind of the, you know, get the Titans getting called Tetons because they were so, you know, bold as to cut off the generative force of the Godfather, you know. But nonetheless, you know, again, Saturn has a big deal. Aphrodite has a big deal. But this cult that we're talking about in Syria is a clone of the Attis cult that was in Phrygia. You know, the Attis cult, there's a goat involved. In the Syrian cult, there's a boar involved. And this Adonis, you know, yeah, let's see. So now when you get into the Bible, Ezekiel 8:14, it reads, then he brought me to the door of the gate of the Lord's house, which was towards the north, and behold, there sat women weeping for Tammuz, right? Which is Sumerian. So this is all the way, but this is the same character tied in with Attis and Adonis. But if you take and you take the original like lexicon of the text, right? The word that they use for Tammuz is actually Adonium, which, you know, therefore the text should read, and behold, the women were sitting there mourning for Adonis, essentially, right? But it was a Latin Vulgate of the 4th century. It was a translation of the Bible by Jerome, who commissioned by Pope Damasius I, revisiting the gospel used for the Roman Church. The name Adonis, which was derived from the Hebrew Adon, being Lord or Master. Adon was given the title of son, the son in some schools, but mostly the Greeks believed the cult to be of an Eastern origin, like Southeast Asian origin. And Adonis was also linked to the ancient Canaanite word of Lord as well. So, you know, you get this Moloch is the king, you get the Adon or Adonis, or even in one point, they called him Anon, like you get the modern, like QAnon.
Yeah,
So,
a lot of people don't know that.
Right. So this is where the original Anon comes from, is from the worship of Adonis, right?
And let me ask you a question. Do you know who Jeff Benner is?
No.
Okay, because he's a Hebrew scholar that translates ancient Hebrew. I actually did a podcast with him. I actually after I did a podcast with him, he actually has a school for translating Hebrew too. He sent me like 16 of his books for free. And his books are a complete breakdown of ancient Hebrew and Aramaic. I mean, a complete breakdown. Do you know who Robert Alter is?
No.
He's another guy that breaks it down. And a lot of what you're saying about Adonis, they would agree with you on that, and I agree with you on it because I heard what they wrote in their books and stuff, and it's very interesting about how you said that Anon, how a lot of people don't even know that. Like when I first read, I want to say I either read that from Robert Alter or Jeff Benner. But they was talking about that in one of their books, and I was like, wow, this is crazy because this goes back. That means this goes back thousands of years.
And, you know, I mean, technically, you know, they talk about the line of Ham, or Cush, Ham to Cush to Nimrod, that was the reason that drove Noah to drink the vineyard, the wine of the vineyard, that caused him to pass out drunk, because these Canaanites, they were basically practicing in these ancient pre-Diluvian rituals that they'd brought, you know, from before the flood. depending on how you look at that whole story. But you know, this gets into the whole idea. I mean, what it really comes down to is they're using substances and chanting and drumming, you know, and they talk about what was it, Jethro, when he made pipes and stringed instruments, and they started playing them, that the you know, demons from the inner earth came into them, bringing the Nashesh, you know, into the new world. But it's this whole thing of connecting with these ancient spirits that are basically, you know, from the histories that I can tell, they're the vengeful spirits that fell and basically ended up being trapped in the matrix because they entered into three-dimensional reality without authority. So they're basically trapped in the three-dimensional matrix until the end of time. You know what I mean?
Interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting, because, you know, a lot of people used to associate, what they still do actually, that Nimrod is some idiot, stupid person, individual that was a hunter and so on and so forth. But this was the dude that actually created the first city in Mesopotamia. Supposedly, he's supposed to be the first dude that created the great city in Mesopotamia. Now, one of the oldest cities in Mesopotamia is supposed to be Europe, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So that's if I'm reading the Bible correctly, if I'm reading the ancient text correctly, for what it's telling me, that means Nimrod is responsible for building the city Europe.
Of Europe. It's tied in with the
supposed to be the oldest one.
Right. And it's also tied in with the Canaanites, also ties in with that same story, because they were workers in metal and they, you know, in fire, and they were worshiping fire. And I think there's a distinction between Ham and Cush, or Cush and Nimrod at one point. Because, you know, the links with Cush to Zoroaster, you know, and you read Zoroastrianism and it's all about purity and the truth. And I think that the point between Nimrod the elder, which is Cush, and Nimrod the younger, because they say there was two Cronoses, there was two Nimrods. This is turning into a show about Nimrod all of a sudden. But
you've done shows on them before too.
Yeah, but I think that at some point that pure worship of the fire in the, you know, that represented the fire in the sky, I think it was inverted. And that's when they started to talk to the underworld elements, you know. But yeah, so now but that's the thing. This all ties into astrology and the worship of the heavens, you know, in combination with as above, so below. And that ties in with Ishtar Inanna, which brings us back to Aphrodite, right? So let's see. Most scholars see the story of Aphrodite and Adonis to be derived from a Levantine tale relating back to early Mesopotamian myth and linked to Inanna Ishtar and the relationship with Dumuzi Tammuz. This worship of Adonis was practiced by the Semitic tribes of Babylon and Syria and was relayed in the Bible as the worship of the Queen of Heaven. So, you know, I wish I had it right in front of me, but Plato talks about there's two Aphrodites. There's one that is a motherless Aphrodite, that is pure love and pleasure in essence. And then there's another Aphrodite that's the offspring of Zeus, that is earthly, kind of common pleasure, that is more about, you know, getting your rocks off in the you know, taking advantage of the pleasures that the world has to offer, rather than the divine heavenly essence of pure love and pleasure, you know. So it's just interesting when you start to look at these things in regard to aspects of the physical world, that they then transfer those characteristics onto actual humans on the earthly plane, and kind of, you know, use those as the symbol, the earthly symbol of the divine essence, basically, you know.
Speaking of which, do you know what this place is?
I don't know.
This is Aphrodite Beach in Cyprus. This is where Aphrodite supposedly washed up onto shore and came out of the shell, as we all know the pictures of Aphrodite. This
Venus.
Right.
Well, and that's so we're talking about those titans a second ago, right? And when the genitals were severed, right, the testicles fell into the water and produced foam in the sea that basically gave rise to these giants with like 100 arms and these abominations. But along
Hecatoncheires.
right. But along with that, you have this beautiful essence that was produced of Venus or Aphrodite that basically was blown on a zephyr until she, reached the shore. So,
What's funny though is look at that rock in the middle of this beach.
yeah,
Right. That is reminding me of those pictures of Venus coming out of the water. That could,
Yeah.
and again, it's that black stone that's associated with Kybele.
Kybele, and the whole ritual of cleansing the stone. They would wash it yearly. It was part of the ritual. But yeah,
And you see the sea foam around the bottom of
the
it.
sea foam. Yeah,
Aphrodite means sea foam.
Yeah, and when the sea foam is coming in and you have those bubbles, the encapsulated air, and the sun's coming through it, and you have the earth and the water. So you have the earth, wind, fire, water, all the 5 elements in that foam, essentially, as it's, creating the life that is the breath of the, yeah.
Absolutely.
So now let's see. Where are we at here? So King Styranus's daughter, Myrrha, was said to be secretly madly in love with her father. And so basically she tricked him into when he was drunk and he was passed out and his wife wasn't around. This was, let's see, there was a festival going on. Yeah, there was a corn festival to Demeter that was going on, and the women in the streets were in white robes offering corn wreaths for the bounty of the first harvest. They would maintain chastity for 9 days, and basically she cornered her dad, and with the help of this nurse, basically, walked away impregnated. And because of that, the king, he was like horrified and basically sought out to kill her because he didn't want to face the embarrassment of what that would bring as far as incestuous behavior in the family, So basically he has his sword out and he's chasing her, and he drives his daughter, Myrrha, into Arabia, and she's basically there for 9 months. And then she's praying to the gods to be invisible or to change her form or something because she's so embarrassed by being impregnated by her father, right? That basically the gods, they hear her prayers and they transform her into a myrrh tree, right? And from that myrrh tree, the balls of sap, when you get the incense, if you get real myrrh, it comes in like balls that kind of bleed out of the tree. They call those the tears of Myrrha, as far as symbolically of her being and you can read this whole tale. Ovid, in his Metamorphosis, he has a bunch of different tales about the different transformations of all these gods and goddess forms, from people into rivers, people into trees into, it's like, yeah, everything. Now some said this metamorphosis was to save her, while others argued it was her punishment. And then at this point, the myrrh tree, it kind of splits open, right? And from the myrrh tree, Adonis is basically birthed from the tree itself, right? And basically at this point, there's different stories, but Adonis is basically dragged into the underworld, and fostered by Proserpine in the underworld, right? So now during this time when this King Cernus was in his kingship, it was the royal lineage of the bloodline was traced through the feminine side of the family. So as a result, the king, in order to maintain his kingly status, would have to be married to the queen. So you have this case where the king, if he wants to maintain, so maybe it was actually that the king was taking the daughter, but we don't know. We're just reading the stories versus the history. But nonetheless, the lineage of the crown was maintained through the feminine, much like the Hebrew lines, right? So let's see now. King Cyrnus, he was said to marry. Now this is in the kingly titles, away from the myth again. The King Cyrnus of Cyprus, which is an island in the middle of the Mediterranean. They call it the gateway to Greece because it was basically a launching point for a lot of the trading going on around the Mediterranean. So King Cyrus was said to have married Aphrodite, the Greek goddess of love, beauty, pleasure, passion, lust, and procreation. This Aphrodite, who Plato in his Phoebus simply refers to as the aspect of pleasure. And then, so you've heard the name Pygmalion randomly. There's this King Pygmalion who was a Phoenician king of Cyprus as well. And he was so in love with Aphrodite that he would take an icon of the goddess to bed with him when he went to bed at night. And within this lineage of Pygmalion, he was the father-in-law of King Cyrnus, the first guy we were talking about there, right? And then who was the grandfather of Adonis. So this is the lineage of Adonis that we have from the texts, coming from Pygmalion to King Cyrnus to Adonis, right? And so that's 3 generations that are in intrigue with this divine priestess, and basically, and when the king would basically be crowned king, they would have a ceremony that was a hierosgamos ceremony, where the king would actually marry the goddess. So, like how within the Catholic Church, he's supposed to be the representative of God on earth. So they would actually have to marry the God form in order to get that scepter of power, in order to be able to rule. So we got 3 generations here.
Well, in the Orphic hymn to Aphrodite, they call her the great scepter bearer. So this is almost like a prerequisite for kingship, is to have the hierosgamos with the goddess.
In order to get the power to be able to rule.
Because that's a male thing, the scepter.
Well, even you see with the Queen of England, King of England, setting up all of their various colonies around the world, like the Parliament in Canada or wherever you want to look, they are given a scepter of power that comes from the monarch, and that is basically the monarch giving them the authority to rule. And if the monarch ever disagrees with what that parliament is doing, they'll take that scepter away, scramble the parliament, bring in all new people, and give them a new scepter. So it's, and this has happened, and within recent history in several countries. So you can kind of see the continuing power that this monarchy really, pushes on the planet.
Is that the missing member of Osiris?
Oh, fuck.
Yeah.
Scepter bearer.
Yeah.
Oh,
Symbolically, I mean, is that scepter an obelisk? It's like a wand. I mean, getting into these different, phallic shaped, the lotus petal, it's a lot of crossover. And what do they say? Every symbol has 7 meanings, and every one of those meanings has 7 meanings. Very fractaline in essence. So, yeah, that's a good analogy, I think. Really. So now Adonis was said to be possessed of such surpassing beauty that Venus Aphrodite became enamored with his beauty and adopted him as her favorite. Adonis, also referred to as the great hunter, very much like Nimrod was, ends his life by being gored to death by a wild boar on Mount Lebanon. And on his death, Venus flew to be by his side, but Adonis was already dead. Adonis's soul was then submerged into the underworld. So here we're having a couple different stories that we can see where he's birthed of the Mercury versus he dies and then is taken into the underworld, right? And this is, you know, you get variations regionally, but you get the essence of the death and the rebirth of the god is the essential function of the process of the stories, depending on how they spread in a fractaline manner and become their own based on the individual community, right? So now Ovid, he tells us that Venus put him in a coffer like Osiris, and basically gave him to Proserpine to keep in the underworld. So now Venus, she was basically praying to the gods, praying to Zeus, Jupiter, trying to get some help in getting Adonis returned to the physical world. But Proserpine had just fallen in love with him because he was so beautiful, and she was wanting to keep him in the underworld. And it goes by, and basically, you know, a deal is made, and Zeus comes in to mediate it, and it's determined that he'll be above ground 6 months and below ground 6 months. Basically, kind of the winter and the summer solstices. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying, geez, that even just go. Sorry.
Yeah. But I've also found some essences of the story where it's broken into 3 parts of the year, where he gets one above ground and one below ground, and then one part of the year to himself. And he can often be seen like lazing around, you know, while his sister is in the underworld. And so there's this idea of the leisure of the turning of the seasons, how, you know, the year goes fast, but the days are long, you know. Let's see now, after her reunion with Adonis, Aphrodite was said to have bathed, just as Demeter after intercourse with Poseidon, linking also to the ritual bathing of the black stone of Mother Cybele that they would do yearly, right? Just as Hera washed in the springs of the river Bura after being overtaken by Zeus, Jupiter. And then also Zeus's wife Hera, she bathed in the springs of Canthonus and would regain her virginity in a yearly cycle. And Hera was the stepmother and cousin of Aphrodite, so within the line of the gods. But it's just interesting how we have these elements of water relating to the divine feminine, getting into the foam of the sea, kind of the emergence of life out of the waters of the deep. You know, it just symbolically, you know, when you start looking at how all these things kind of come together, right? Now, the Hellenistic Greek poet Lycopron adds that for Aphrodite hastening to her wounded lover, she trod on a bush of white roses. The cruel thorns tore her tender flesh, and her sacred blood dyed the white roses forever red. Basically painting the roses red, which we see in the modern mythology of Alice in Wonderland.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So now in Goodwin's Moses and Aaron, he relates that concerning Adonis, who sometimes the ancient authors called Osiris, there are 2 things remarkable. Aphronismos being the death or loss of Adonis, and Hierosis, which is the finding of him again. And those are basically represented by the different seasons, which he is said to go. And within this region, you know, a lot of this is related to the crops, and much like Osiris, you know, being the god of the underworld, pushing the shoots up. And there's this essential thing where when he comes back, you know, it basically brings the foliage and the crops, and is the power that's, you know, from coming to basically push the crops to grow the food for the people to eat, so that they can have these metropolises, you know, these early metropolises. So let's see. Now,
I like how you do that, man. I like how you read it from the actual text. That's amazing to me, because a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people like to tell you to go do your own research, and you're saying, hey, well, I know you probably won't do your own research, so I'm going to read it right here from it.
Well, but that's the thing. I'm also doing it for myself, just so I can have these things as artifacts. You know, what did Plato say? That, you know, basically all is forgetting. And that basically when you study, you take these ideas and you put them back in your head so that you can remember. So
that's why I created my series, What I've Learned from Reading This Book, because I like to go back to the tabs that I have and just read what I have in the tabs, because it's a refresher. I say it every time I do an episode. I say this is for me to sit here and basically just refresh my memory on what it is that I know. So that way it's not for anybody in particular. It's just for me, but because I want to share it with the world, I have social media, I have the YouTube, the Rumble counts, and all that other stuff. So if you care to want to learn, you'll follow me. If not, that's okay. It's no sweat off my back. I came into this game knowing that I thought, be honest with you, I didn't think one person would listen to what I said. Now I'm being asked to come to conventions and stuff. So it's actually pretty interesting and fun to know that the stuff that I know and what I'm sharing is backed up, because I haven't had not one person come to me and say you're wrong. I mean, I've had people say I'm wrong about stuff, but I never had anybody say, hey, you're wrong because of this, that, and the third. They just saying that I'm wrong because of their feelings are hurt or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Well, and also, you know, just as humans, we're fallible. You know, we're going to have, you know, our brain can only store so much information. So, you know, it's kind of good to have the availability of some of these things. And then, you know, I can point people in the exact direction, right? So now after the ordeal, there became tales where King Cernunnos ended his own life after the events from the shame. The Greek narratives convey that the king was defeated in a musical contest with Apollo, and as part of his loss, the god put him to death. But according to Anserion, a Greek lyric poet who was known for his drinking songs and erotic poetry, tells us that King Cernunnos lived to be to the ripe old age of 160. So these rites of Adonis were centralized in two places in Western Asia, both in Byblos and on the coast of Syria, and Paphos in Cyrus. These were great seats of the center of the worship of Adonis. Now, Aphrodite was worshipped just as the Semitic Astarte, and it was King Cernunnos who ruled over the city of Byblos, which was one of the most ancient cities in Phoenicia. This city was said to have been founded by Lord El, with whom the Greeks identified with Kronos, going back to Saturn, who had founded it in the ancient days of the earth. So Byblos was the same city that Osiris, when he had died, when Set nailed him in the box within the Egyptian mysteries, and they floated him down the Nile, it was in this city of Byblos that we're talking about, where Adonis was centralized. And this city of Byblos was like an ancient Mecca to the Phoenicians, where they would make pilgrimages basically to come worship this dead and risen god form that matched, because when Osiris came down into Byblos, a tamarisk tree grew around that casket or that box that Set had made. And King Melkart, who's a god, he finds Osiris, who's another god, and basically takes this tree that appeared overnight and cuts it down and puts it in his palace, right? And when Isis goes out to search for Osiris, when he's been sent away. She comes to Byblos, and she basically comes in disguise, and like she's like helping the court of the king basically do these different things, and she's like braiding the women's hair in ways they hadn't seen, and she's like breathing her beautiful breath on them so that they had this beautiful essence of smell. And you know, so they bring her into the center court with the king, and they entrust the offspring of the king to her, and she's feeding the king with her fingers, basically with her blood versus the milk, right? And at night when nobody's around, she's putting the baby in the fire to burn off all the mortal parts and turn this little guy into an immortal being, right? But they catch her, and basically they get all upset, and they're threatening to drive her out. And she says, okay, here's the real deal. I'm Queen Isis, and my husband's in the tree. And basically they cut it down and they open it up, and you know, Osiris is inside of this tree. In the Book of the Dead, or the Book of Coming Forth, you know, the Egyptian text, it says that this was a sycamore tree. But in the other text, it says it was a tamarisk tree. But nonetheless, within these religions of, we talked about Addis and Mother Kybele, right? And now we're talking about Adonis and Aphrodite. In all of these three cultures, you have this story where they would basically take a tree as part of the ritual, and they would have these Zimmermen that were like these sacred woodsmen. I'm calling them Zimmerman. That's a German name, but I'm comparing them to the Zimmerman. But they had these sacred woodmen that would cut down a tree, and then they would hollow it out and take that center part of the tree and carve an idol out of it, of the dead and risen God. And then they would put it back in the tree and carry, and this would happen on 322 as far as the date. And this ties in with Demosthenes and this cult of the dead, where we get, you know, the 322 of the skull and bones, the order of the skull and bones, basically. But basically they would then, you know, and in skull and bones, they lay in the coffin, much like this idol is in the tree. And they would bring this tree with the idol into the temple and set it up for the year. And that was a representation of the god, almost like the Egyptians had the form of Linus, which was the god in a state of limbo that became the Serapian bull, right? This is a state of the god in stasis before he's ready. And then, you know, they would basically bring this statue from this tree kind of casket coffin out for the spring festival, and they would anoint it with holy oil and be burning incense. They would dress it in fabulous garments, and you know, and then on the third day of the festival, you know, the god would rise and they would all yell, "He has risen," and everybody would celebrate, right? So this is what
sounds familiar.
Yeah,
sounds
exactly.
really familiar.
Really familiar. So this is what, when we talked about the women weeping, and they had changed the word to Tammuz from Adonis, this is the description of that time when they were weeping over the dead god before he was resurrected, right? So if anybody wants to add anything, go ahead.
Yeah, so I pulled out the golden ass again, because in this book they have so many references to Isis.
Yep, you're at the end of the book, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, I know you are.
So I got this little part here. It says, feeling that fate was now satiated with my endless miseries and at last licensed the hope of salvation, I determined to implore the august image of the risen goddess. So shaking off my tiredness, I scrambled to my feet and walked straight into the sea in order to purify myself. Again, back to that Kybele worship, right?
Yep.
Immersed my head 7 times because, according to the divine Pythagoras, that number is specially suited for all ritual acts. And then, speaking with lively joy, I lifted my tear-wet face in supplication to the irresistible goddess. Queen of heaven, whether you are fostering Osiris, the motherly nurse of all growth, who, gladdened at the discovery of your lost daughter, abolished the brutish nutriment of the primitive acorn and pointed the way to gentler covery for your lost daughter, abolished in the brutish nutriment of the primitive acorn and pointed the way to gentler food, as is yet shown in the telling of the fields of Elysis, or whether you are celestial Venus, who in the first moment of creation mingled with the opposing sexes in the generation of mutual desires, and who, after sowing in humanity the seeds of indestructible continuing life, are now worshipped in the wave-washed shrine of Paphos, or whether you are the sister of Phoebus, who by reliving the pangs of childbirth travail with soothing remedies, who have brought safe into the world lives innumerable, and who are now venerated in... These are all the epithets of the goddess that he's using over and over again to call to her. The thronged sanctuary of Ephesus, or whether you are Persephone, terrible with the howls of midnight, whose triple face has power to ward off all the assaults of ghosts and to close the cracks in the earth. Who does that sound like? That sounds a little bit like the not Phrygian. It's lower than that, but this is what's her name?
The cracks in the earth. I'm trying to think.
No, the underworld goddess with three faces.
Oh, with three faces.
Hecate?
Yeah, Hecate. There you go.
Yeah.
Right. So he's just listing all of these different goddesses as a way to implore or cry out to Isis, who he thinks is the most ancient, so that she could turn him back into a man from a donkey.
An ass. Yeah.
Right.
And what does it say? But the oldest and the most schooled in the myths call me by my true name, Queen Isis, essentially. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So,
but you guys sing Hathor does predate Isis.
Hathor?
Yeah.
Does and Isis actually absorbed a lot of Hathor's qualities at one point.
That's why I'm a Hathor fan than Isis. It also depends on what kind of part of the story I think you're looking for.
Yeah.
And also, this is 2nd century AD, so there's probably a lot lost between ancient Hathor worship, and this is also not in Egypt at all. So, this Isis cult changes from different parts of the world that it goes into.
Well, but that's the whole thing. These stories, moved from Southeast Asia and the Mesopotamia into Cyprus and Greece, and became the Titomancy, became the stories of the, and you can just interrelate these figures, easily through reference of symbols.
I think the spelling of Isis and the artistic depiction and stuff like that is actually more fitting than Hathor for certain things.
Yeah.
So I understand that.
Yeah.
Hathor syncretism. Well, Hathor syncretism in Greece is Io, right? There's that whole myth of Io and Zeus.
Yeah. And what was it? Rhea, she was in Babylon and she got her head chopped off, and they talk about she was reborn as Rhea. And then you have Virgil talking about Rhea riding into Spain and finding Zeus or Saturn or Kronos there, and basically saying you can't stay here, and sends him to Italy. So you see these migration, of these different gods at different points in the histories of these nations. And it's just interesting. To say it's all true, who knows? But this is, what all the ancient philosophers and poets and, have kind of pieced together for us if you take all these puzzle pieces and kind of put them together,
Right. It's the cult of the mysteries that sort of tie them all together in all these different places.
Right. And it was
we all take the. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if we all take our pieces of the puzzle and put them together, ain't no telling what we might see.
Oh, I know. And so there's in one Philip K. Dick book, right? They talk about you couldn't have a 3-dimensional hologram of the Bible on this certain mining moon, right? Because you could take that story and basically, depending on the different angles you looked at it from, you would see different things within the story that nobody else could see. So they outlawed these things because they didn't want people making these kind of connections, you know, it's just from a sci-fi standpoint, you know, making a statement on the state of things that be, you know.
Well, they didn't want the Christian mysteries, the mysterion, to be decoded, because then it goes back to something older, and they don't want to talk about that.
Right, right. Especially when you get into who was the founder of the Catholic Church, Peter Simon, or, you know, yeah. So now the city stood on a height beside a sea and contained a great sanctuary of Astarte, where in the midst of a spacious open court, surrounded by cloisters and approached from below by a staircase, rose a tall cone or an obelisk as the holy image of the goddess. In this sanctuary, the rites of Adonis were celebrated. Indeed, the whole city was seen as sacred to Adonis, and the river Nihar Ibrahim, which falls into the sea a little south of Byblos, bore in antiquity the name of Apollo. This was the kingdom of Cyrnus. That's from James G. Frazier. I just have stuff about King Cyrnus built a temple to Aphrodite on Mount Lebanon. Carvings of Aphrodite depict them in recesses, oftentimes show Adonis with a spear as the great hunter, and Aphrodite mourning the loss of her beloved. It is believed that the tomb of Adonis lies in Farkra, Vardeban in Lebanon. His worshippers following the idea that this gored man god, who was wounded and died in the mountain home of his adorned companion, whose blood ran down like that of Prometheus, this blood would dye the river red. So basically, in the time of the heavy rains in this region, you would have the mountain deposits were filled with this heavy iron sediment. So as the rain would come down, all the runoff would be this red blood color that would just fill the rivers, and the river would turn blood red. And, you know, within the procession of Mother Kybele, same thing with Adonis and Aphrodite. They would have a procession to the sea to wash the statue, where this blood red river ran into the crystalline blue Mediterranean waters. So if you can imagine, you know, this just red rush flowing into what's normally, you know, a crystalline blue sea, it had to be quite a sight, you know. But that was one of the symbols that they saw as the time to begin the festival of the dead and risen God. So
absolutely. And if you think about the plagues in Egypt, you know, when the Nile ran red, there's a lot of that indicating factor in there as well.
Oh yeah. So in Lebanon, where this river is dedicated to Adonis, I already went over that. Let's see. So Adonis was said to be the son of Agirius, the father of Esum, identified with the Greek Asclepius, also connecting with Gilgamesh, Cush, and Nimrod in his search for mortality. Adonis also appears in, now this is where it gets interesting, right? So Adonis also appears in the earliest Masonic constitutions. Dr. Albert G. Mackey in the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry, I have a hard copy from 1886. He says that the old manuscripts from Dowland in 1550 to the Allenwick of 1701, that Amon, Ajan, Anon, or Ajan. He says, now what word would this be a corruption of? The Cook manuscript does not give any name, but says that this is the king's son of Tyre and was Solomon's master mason. Right? So all other succeeding manuscripts, without exception, admit this relationship. Thus, the Dallin manuscript, which it is followed by all others, says that King Hiram had a son that was called Anon, and he was a master of geometry, and he was the chief master of all Solomon's masons. The idea was thus established that the man was of royal dignity, the Sun King, and that he was also the ruler of the craft. So now when we get into Adonis, what we have to look at is this is in the city of Byblos, right? And this is the city that Osiris came down and washed up in, right? This is the city where all these statues that we're talking about within the trees are going on. And then we have the king's son is the one that is summoned up to go to Israel, basically, to build the first Solomon's temple. And this is Anon or Adonis, essentially, right? So let's see. A Christian deacon of Persia in 350 AD, Saint Abdisius, tells us that Solomon not only translated into Syriac the greater part of the Old Testament, the Pentateuch, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, Samuel, David, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Songs, and Job at Hiram's special request, but he also invented the characters according to Jesudad, who says that where Moses invented the Hebrew letters, Solomon invented all other, which he gave to the people by which he was honored. But he first of all invented the Syriac letters, which he gave to Hiram, the king of Tyre. So, and this kind of ties in with the Kabari. It kind of ties in with the bringing of the language into Greece that they talk about by who was it there? I'll remember the name in a minute. So now, while it was supposed this lord of Tyre, being Anon or Adon, was skilled in many trades of the time, from wood carving to sculpture, as well as working with delicate textiles and fabric, as well as the fiery skill of casting bronze of a gigantic nature, like the foot bath, the sea, the molten sea that was within the temple, that was said to have 6,000 foot baths within it, right? Let's see. Also, like I said, linking in with the Kabari, who were the first to discover the art of metalworking, being the line of Cain or the Canaanites, also tying in with the Rakshasas of India, also tying in with Nimrod and the fire worship and their making of weapons, as well as you get into Tubal Cain, you get into all these various, even what was it, Vulcan, coming up and basically being the forger in metals, making the weapons for the gods, right? But the Kabari, they discovered the art of metalworking and were the first to build ships. So right in the same region where we have these Hamites coming in and taking over and becoming the Phoenicians, this first shipbuilding culture that's creating all this trade and spreading all these mystery schools through the land. These Kabari were seen as gods of navigation and were represented as small dwarfs who were misshapen creatures who were said to be the first to have sailed by using the pole star for reference. So,
it's so funny because I get to see how I look when I'm reading from the book. So this is this is awesome to me because I'm sitting here, I'm really into this. Like I'm taking notes at the same time that you're doing this because it's a lot of people don't do that, and I commend you a lot on that because you're taking what you've actually read. You're not saying this is my opinion, this is my facts or anything like that. You're just saying
I'm just drawing from the histories. I'm showing you exactly what the histories say, and I will also oftentimes show you how there's contradicting histories. So, and like I said, the history is like a fractal. Everywhere you go, there, you got this side of the story and that side of the story, and with the with Addis, right? There's some stories that say he was born kind of like feminine, maybe androgynous, and that it was obvious he would never produce kids. So they sent him to Syria, and he set up the worship of the goddess, which is where the Adonis Aphrodite worship is, you know, directly tying Adonis with and Phoenicia with Syria and Aphrodite, you know. So it's and then very much like with Adonis, you have numerous Greek stories within the Dionysian texts that talk about they carried away Adonis, that Dionysus carried away Adonis. But it's, you know, if you could look into the Masonic encyclopedia by Mackey that I've got, it talks about Osiris, that he went out and civilized the world, and he had a train of satyrs and different, you know, little goat men and like all these different amorphous creatures that went with him, and they basically, you know, kind of brought everyone into their good graces by playing music everywhere they went. And then after they got in with the communities, they would teach them about how to plant grain, you know. And it says they ended a lot of, you know, cannibalistic, you know, diets, and brought this grain into the world, that came with it this story of the mystery schools and these dead and risen gods, which when you get into James G. Frazier, over and over, the only thing he can associate it with is you take the seed, the plant, you know, like the wheat, and then you thresh the wheat and separate the wheat from the chaff, and then you store the wheat in, you know, a dark place. You put it in a hole, and then it's resurrected and rises up. So in a lot of essence, symbolically, yes, but at the same time, as you follow this mystery school later and later, you have physical people that become these entities for the sake of rulership, becoming like the King of England, or like, you know, whatever monarch you want to look at, becoming the God man on earth, or the representative of God on earth, for the sake of gaining power, you know. And it becomes vastly manipulated. And then you have the rise of you know, the Chaldean oracles getting in and starting to, like the Bene Gesserit witches, you know, behind the scenes, kind of controlling all the bloodlines and, you know, what wars are fought. And it's better than anything you can watch on TV, getting into a lot of these texts, you know.
Cadmus was the name you were looking for, the bringer of the alphabet to Greece.
Cadmus, yes, that's right. Yeah, totally. So let's see. Now, in the Hebrew, the word Adon is given as a title of dignity, and these rites and mysteries of Adonis, which were focused in the city of Byblos, this once small fishing trading village, after sprouting up some 5,000 years ago. This is one of the oldest cities on the planet, right? And it just grew up into a metropolis. The city of Byblos, it was called by the Greeks, it was called Gibel, right? And they said that the inhabitants of this city were called the Giblamites, right? And within the Masonic initiations, in order to become a master mason, the secret password is Gibbum or Gibellum. And basically, so, you know, and when you get into the Masonic writings, Mackey talks about the fact that this word Gibellum, it means a master mason, right? It means a stone squarer, basically one that was, you know, squaring the stones to put in Solomon's temple, right? This was said. I was just reading another Mackey book, The History of Freemasonry, and he was talking about this was when Masonry became organized, was at Solomon's temple, basically, right? But if you look at Kings 5:18, it said, and Solomon's builders and Hiram's builders did hew them, and the stone squarers, so they prepared the timber and the stones to build the house of David, or, you know, the Solomon's temple. And in Ezekiel 27:9, they talk about the ancients of Gibel and the wise men thereof were in thy caulker. All the ships of the sea with their mariners were in thee to occupy thy merchants. So these Giblamites, they also were the ones that went in and caulked the ships of the Phoenicians to basically seal them so that they would stay afloat. So, you know, these Giblamites, they have all these skills, and these Giblamites are what end up becoming this secret builder guild within the mystery schools that we see coming into Greece, that eventually builds the Grecian architecture and the temples we have remaining from that time, basically, right? So let's see.
Well,
Now,
isn't it funny that these are the bringers of all of this knowledge to the ancient world, supposedly, right? And then during the Punic Wars, right, this is when the Romans basically fully declare war on the Canaanite Phoenicians.
Well, and that's the whole thing with Carthage. That's why they're fighting Carthage, is because it is a Phoenician city. And this whole thing was for a struggle for the trade in the Mediterranean.
Well, and Jerusalem. Jerusalem was a Canaanite city. These are the places where they completely wreck everything and salt the earth afterwards, is because this influence was too corrosive for them to handle. So it's
but
really
interestingly, as you see, when Hannibal is in Italy and he won't leave, they talk to the Sibylline oracles, and the Sibylline oracle tells them to bring Mother Cybele from ancient Phoenicia, because Virgil, through his propaganda, he's already linked the foundations of Rome back to ancient Phrygia. So they're going to bring this ancient Phrygian goddess, and they transport her into Rome, and they put her on Palatine Hill and give her a supreme place, and she becomes the mother of all the gods of Rome. And all the gods of Rome start to participate in her ceremonies. And then through the back door, they bring in Attis, as far as the castrations and the blood-soaked, parades. And and that was appalling to Rome, very much like when Dionysus came into Greek, the things that he was offering were appalling to the Greeks. If you get into John J. Robison's work that he does on the Illuminati, he speculates that these Dionysians coming from the school of Attis and the school of Adonis, basically coming into Greece, they were wearing the Phrygian hat from ancient Phrygia, which became the symbol of the freed slave in Rome, which became the hat of the French Revolution for liberté, fraternité, equalité. And so they're coming in and they're spreading these revolutionary ideas, that man is above, king. That this whole idea that, we are sovereign kings on earth, and kind of bringing these, this fire, and in Greece, you end up, one of the kings, he ends up getting his head cut off. And it's, and you got the Dionysian Maenads that they're sending out that are, high on these hallucinogenic brews, and they're like beating drums and going, and if they found a cow in a field, man, they would just jump on the cow and rip it apart and eat it. And, and that was the same thing with the fawns of Bacchus wearing the fawn skin, going back to Nimrod and the leopard skin, and they would basically pull a fawn apart and eat that as part of the mysteries,
Right. Well, also, you've got Orpheus, right, who is pulled apart by the Maenads as well.
Right.
So there's this constant sort of shakeup of the hierarchy and cannibalism.
Right.
So these things are always going hand in hand. And then you see the communists today, they're all wearing the Phrygian cap of the French Revolution and all these other, revolutionary stuff going back thousands and thousands of years.
I would even say that the red hat as far as the Trump hats would be very symbolic of a red Phrygian hat, of revolution. getting into Che Guevara, looking at the red French beret, tying that in with the Phrygian hat. You can see these red hats through history that symbolically represent the idea of overturning the system.
Well, even look
Right.
at Adonis. He's a dead and rising. I mean, Trump with all the fucking his
And-
whole part of the running that second time, or third time.
Back to the dead and risen, God man.
All these things in court. Oh,
Yep.
He almost got his head blown off.
Yeah, no, but I'm just saying, like,
Yeah,
everything was
yeah.
constant, like, he
Yeah.
had everything thrown at him, and he still prevailed.
I mean, you just have to wonder divine, interference or human interference, or you just have to wonder what this political theater in the fog of war actually is.
Who's pulling the strings?
I know.
Who's pulling the strings on all these puppets?
I know.
And then you go back to Addis and Adonis, and you're like, "Hey, it's still here. What's going on?"
I know. Exactly. So now George Ralston, he talks about there were 2 trading fleets of the Phoenicians that contributed ships and men, which are mentioned in 1 Kings 27, 10 through 22. One from Izanagaber, trading with Ophir on the south coast of Arabia, and perhaps even more east to India and Malabar and Ceylon. And the other, probably from Tyre, navigated to the Mediterranean, entering the ocean and trading with Tartarus and Gades, perhaps with West African and Cornwall. And then the eastern navy of Ophir would always bring back vast quantities of gold, together with almond trees, sandalwood trees, precious stones, spices. The Western only made the voyage once a year, and it would bring back silver and gold, along with ivory, ebony, apes, and peacocks. And they were also trading in slaves as well. But you can see how the Phoenicians, they had these undisclosed secret locations that they would go to bring back frankincense and myrrh, or and nobody knew where to get these things. So they would go into these countries, and if you read the Book of Invasions, they talk about the fact that the Phoenicians would set up a small port city and basically buy all the goods from the local people as cheap as they could get them. They'd throw them on ships, and they'd move them to another country and sell them for outrageously high amounts and bring back minerals and gold and silver. And so this is the beginning of the first, big trading network that basically are these Hamites, these line of Ham to Cush to Nimrod that are inflecting these mystery schools, coming down and assimilating Phoenicia. And they talk about the fact that once the Israelites came out of Egypt and began merging in to this area, because this was the promised land, essentially, right? There's records of them writing just signing the complete government of the Canaanites over to the Phoenicians. And this is basically where Canaanite history ends and the beginning of Phoenicia starts. So.
Well, right, that big shakeup where the Neo-Assyrians moved in and took over everything.
Mhm.
And then once they moved away from that, then there was sort of like this power vacuum. And that's when the rise of the Phoenicians, rise of the Hebrews really started to take off.
Right. And so James G. Frazier, even though he constantly comments on the idea that it's this grain god that's being risen, and he says that naturally the Semitic colonists brought their god with them from the motherland, the worship of Baal from Lebanon, who may have been Adonis. And I would say he was on the right path, because from my researches, I would agree 100% that this Moloch Baal of the Canaanites basically ties directly in with Adonis and Addis, and these spreading mystery schools again.
I got a decode for you. So they would get. Have you ever gotten real close to a pine tree and seen how there's these white particles on the end of the leaves?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that is actually yeast. And this dying and rising god associated with grain mixed with the yeast from the pine tree or Addis creates a rising god, which would be the beer.
Yep. And
right?
the Egyptians called it the Popher. It was the divine the breath of the divine feminine that would come in and energize or encourage the god to rise, you know. And within Egypt, there was one of the temples, there's a place where there's images of Osiris, and the high priest is watering him with a pitcher, and corn stalks are growing out of his back, and it says, "This is the form of the god that cannot be named." So this was the most secret form of Osiris. You know, the fact that he had the energy to push these shoots up out of the earth. And this ties over into these are all rising agricultural communities. So, you know, this is all part of this essential function of the state, tied in with the agriculture, tied in with the priesthood, and basically, you know, bringing forth culture. The cities, you know, these walled cities that Mother Kibble, you know, she wore the turreted crown of the walls or the shells, basically because she was the builder of walls. She was the mother of the state, technically, you know. In the Irish Book of Invasions, it also, and this is from the 6th, 7th century, it says that Ashtaroth or Eshtaroth was the guardian of the Phoenician ships. And so Ashtaroth tying in with what is it, Mother Kibble tying in with Aphrodite, is basically the protection of the Phoenicians. When they would go on the ships, they would basically say prayers to Mother Ashtaroth or Aphrodite to basically protect them while they were out at sea, right? And it also had to do with the Morning Star. And there was this bird that they related to the Morning Star that built its nest on the water. And it would basically float on the water. And whenever the Phoenician sailors saw those birds, they said it was a good sign of the, you know, to sail the seas.
Which bird was that? Albatross, was it?
Oh, I'd have to look it. I'll look it up. If I find it, I'll send it to you. I can't remember the name of the bird. Yeah, but the fact that it floated on the water, it was representative of the God form right at the horizon, between the transition between life and death. You know,
even get the egg too.
Yeah, and the egg and time and all the things that eggs. Yeah. Well,
right.
There's actually a couple of there's a couple of birds that do that. One of them is the Grebus. They do a floating nest. The puffins, the gannets, the horned gibbous. So there's a couple of birds.
I think it was the gibbous.
Oh,
that sounds like that. And that gets into gibbous, gibbon, you know. So let's see now. Mackey, he relates that Gibbon, or the builders of Gibbal, who acted an important part in the construction of the Temple of Solomon, is equivalent to the Masonic epithet of the grand architect of the universe. The inquiring Freemason will readily see anthology in symbolism that exists between Adonis in the mysteries of the Giblamites at Byblos and Hiram as the builder of his own institution, right? So now this Gibbon, or these Giblamites, as the inhabitants of the city of Gibel, also called Byblos, right? Which Byblos is where they basically took the papyrus and made the paper and started making the first books, right? And there's a plenty of references where they're moving texts around as well in these books. Before printing, you know, they're probably copied by scribes. I would most imagine.
And the Bible, that's where we get the term Bible from.
That's where we get the term Bible, is from this city of Byblos, where this resurrected God in the form of the mystery schools, that, you know, it all ties in, you know. So now Mackie, he says that the Gibble or the Giblamite is not a Mason, generally, but especially a class of Mason who Drummond says put the finishing touches on King Solomon's temple, right? But so now if we trace this word Gibbum back into ancient Cana, right? And this is from the Story of Chaldea by Ragazon from 1890, right? He says, but while the sun accompanies its nightly underground journey, men would be left a prey to the mortal terrors in the upper world, deprived of light. Their chief defense against the evil brood of darkness, were it not for its substitute, fire, who is by nature also a being of light, and as such a friend to man, from whose paths dwelling he scares not only wild beasts and foes armed with open violence, but the far more dangerous hosts of unseen enemies, both demons and spells cast by wicked sorcerers. In this capacity of protection, that god of Gibble, or fire, is chiefly invoked in one very complete hymn, and he is addressed as thus: Thou who drivest away the evil Maskim, who furtherest the well-being of life, who strikest the breasts of the wicked with terror, Gibel, the destroyer of foes, dread weapon, which drivest away pestilence. And that comes from about 4000 BC, that inscription, right? So tying these ancient Masonic orders back to this Adonis of the mystery school, who is living in the city that the Masons say is named after a Mason. So symbolically, is that telling us that the Masons are really represented by fire or lightning from the heavens, is what it really comes down to,
Right. And then that goes into the mysteries of the Iranians too, because you've got a lot of fire worship there too.
Yep. And Zoroaster,
Right.
basically calling down lightning, not dying, and basically much like Enoch.
He's riding the lightning.
What's that?
He's riding the lightning, man.
Riding the lightning, bro. Yeah. Enoch, he calls down lightning, and he basically, through a lightning strike, is absorbed, and as the Hebrews say, he was translated into the heavens and became the little Yahweh with his own throne right next to God. And basically God would send him out to go do the things he didn't want to do, and he would ride around the universe in his self-manifested Merkaba, which is that upward facing pyramid, the downward facing pyramid put together. He would ride around in one of those like a spaceship, right? And basically he was there when Moses parted the sea. He's credited with all these various things.
Seal of Solomon.
What's that?
The Seal of Solomon is the two triangles together.
Yeah, for sure.
Same star, yeah.
Right. Well, and when you get into that, there is a debate as to whether or not it was the 5-pointed or the 6-pointed star that's on Solomon's ring. But if you read the Masonic texts, they tell you it was a 6-pointed star. So yeah. So let's see. Fire is not only a great power on earth, it is also in the shape of lightning, one of the dreadest and most mysterious powers of the sky, and as such sometimes called as the son of Ana, and Ana is the ancient term for heaven in Sumar, or in a more roundabout way, the hero son of the ocean, meaning the celestial ocean, the great reservoir of rains from which the lightning seems to spring as it flashes through the heavy showers of a southern thunderstorm. In whatever shape he appeared and whatever his function, Gibal is hailed as an invariable beneficiary and friendly being to these ancient Canaanites. So, and this Gibal or this Gibellum is also the word we see that becomes corrupted into Jubellum and the Jubilees, right? In the Jubilee, you know, they need to give a Jubilee.
Yeah,
So,
we're
you
dying
know,
for one. It's been way more than
dude,
70 years. Come on, let's get a Jubilee going
I
on
know, I know. So now these Gibelum, as the stonecutters of Solomon's temple, were especially known for their technique of what is called 8-tone carving. And these stonecutters would work the square stones to perfection
Yeah.
and were considered to be more qualified in the higher ranks of the workers and builders of such sacred spaces. These Gibelum maintained a mystery school based around the worship of Adonis, and who were the occulted order who maintained a monopoly on the creation of the temple structures and sacred spaces, as we see moving into Greece. So,
Absolutely. And there's so much between Biblos and the Bible and the 70 books, right? The Septuagint, which was
right,
called the Big G.
right,
And then you go right back into Masonry again.
yes,
So it all sort of ties back into itself.
the Gibel, the Gibum, the Gibellum, the Big G. You know, this is I think one of the secrets of that, what that G, if you look at the 7 possible, you know, because even sometimes you see the G in a small G basically representing the serpent, you know, which is the you know, shadows in the waters of the depth, because when you merge those 2 triangles together, which you have the Masonic compass, which draws the circles, and then you have the Masonic square, which makes the angles. So you have the angles and the circles. In between that, when you merge those 2 together, like the Star of Rephesh, which is basically an Egyptian star that goes to Saturn that the modern Zionists had picked up, you basically have steam, and it's in that steam that basically this amorphous space that anything can be created with the direction of will, essentially, you know.
Right. And when you look through the Canaanite Phoenician art, you'll start to see these themes pick up over and over and over again. It's very deceptively simple. It looks simple on the surface, but it has so much deep meaning that people who aren't abreast of this stuff have no idea what they're looking at.
That's the whole terminology of those with eyes to see and those with ears to hear, you know, is you and that's with the mystery schools. Again, when you're initiated, you learn these symbols. They present these symbols to you, and they give you an exoteric meaning. And then as you're initiated through to the degrees, they explain the higher essences of these symbols and how they relate to, you know, the interconnection and the higher levels of reality of this rebirth of, you know, the essence of the self, you know. So now underneath the Gibum, they had another association of these Masonic orders that were called the Bonai, Bonai. And the Bonai were the laborers who put the strength into raising the structures with these prepared blocks by the Gibum for the construction. And at Solomon's temple, there were some 80,000 Bonai, all of whom the Masons in their text, they call them the Brighton Fellow Crafts. And when you get into these Bonai down the road, they're the ones that become the Samaritans. And they're
bones of the AI.
Yeah.
The bones of the AI.
The AI. Yeah.
And they're trying to build a god using AI.
And they kept going in and trying to, you know, help build the temple. And what was it? One of the Caesars went and examined the Hebrew text and examined the Samaritan text and said they were similar, but they had, you know, differences. Again, the fractal spins, you know, their own worshiping their own version of what this thing is, going back to the ancient, you know, Saturnian forces, the black cube, however you want to, you know, look at this thing, right? So now these Gibum in their worship celebrated the rights of Adonis as Adon, their lord. This practice in all cases was said to first have been established in ancient Babylon under the queen Astarte or Semiramis. The given giving us a tie to the earlier lands of Nimrod, and had next been transplanted to Syria with the high places of worship in Greek Byblos and Phoenician Gebal, worshiping in the high places and maintaining this mysterious tragic death and subsequent reformation of life, being ritually celebrated in vast temples built by a guild of brothers as a tool to present immensely and beautiful, terrible powers of the divine in their suffering. So, and it was on the coast of ancient Phrygia at Athamas on the island of Cyprus, where this ancient royal city in which the institutions of the rites of Adonis in celebration of Aphrodite were established, moving into Greece. And here we have again, these rites represented the Egyptian worship of Osiris so closely that some even identified Adonis of Athamas with Osiris. So, yeah, and I have here Fraser. He documents, this is in the Golden Bough. He says, a pine tree having been cut down, the center would be hollowed out, and with the wood thus excavated, an image of Osiris was made, which would be buried like a corpse in the hollow of the tree. The image of Osiris was thus kept for a year and then burned, exactly as was done with the image of Attis, which was attached to the pine tree as well. And Osiris was, go ahead.
Well, that goes into the mysteries of the Masons as well, the first 3 degrees, because
Right.
at the end, when Hiram is buried, they put on top of his grave the pine tree.
Right. And well, so now also Hiram Abiff, which means Hiram the Eliminated. Hiram, he is basically this artisan that is coming from Byblos, the city that we've been talking about, and within the Masonic orders, in order to get into the 3rd degree of the Master Masons, they have a passion play that's basically the death of Osiris, and they're looking for his body. And basically, King Solomon sends some of these Master Masons out. Well, just Masons out. And the first one, the entered apprentice, when they find an acacia branch and they lift it and find the decomposing body of this Hiram Abiff. And the master or the entered apprentice, he tries to, with the entered apprentice handshake, which is the thumb, he tries to basically lift the corpse of Hiram Abiff, but the skin begins to come off. So then the 2nd degree, he tries his handshake and he can't get him up. So finally, it's Solomon himself, I think, that ends up coming in and using the lion's paw grip, and basically pulls him up in such a way that his right foot is by his right foot, his left hand, their left hands are on each other's back, and their mouths are right next to each other's ears. And that's when King Solomon whispers in this risen Mason's ear, he whispers Mahabone, which is this new word that is basically the secret word to replace the word which was lost when Hiram was killed. So yeah, same story, again in another form that's being used in modern day Masonic ritual function to enter into the highest degree, the 3rd degree of the Blue Lodge of Masonry. So
right.
Yeah.
And if all of those Masons don't know that their mysteries come through Canaanite Phoenicia,
right,
you're missing out on everything. I mean,
these are all the secrets.
Right.
Yeah. So now Lucian, in his Dea de Syria, he says that so closely did the rites of Osiris resemble those of Adonis at Byblos that some of the people at Byblos themselves maintained that it was Osiris and not Adonis's death who they were mourning. And Herodotus, he also says that Adonis, Attis, Dionysus, and Demeter are religions of the same type. And let's see, we see also the Tyrian Melkart being worshipped side by side with Adonis. And there are inscriptions showing that he was revered in Larnax Lepidus. And Adonis was identified in Larnax Lepidus with a deity that the Greeks associated with Poseidon, of the underworld, Poseidon's of the underworld, Osiris is of the underworld. And initially what's funny is Osiris was initially the god of life. And, everybody went to him for their rebirth in the afterworld, right? And when Alexander the Great came in and brought, what was the line there that he left to be the pharaohs that were, I'll think of it in a minute, but these were Greeks basically, or Greeks. And they where was I going with that? Oh, they changed the religion of Osiris. And because he had died, they started relating, because he was the king of the underworld and bringing people back to life, they started to relate Osiris with Pluto. And so Osiris shifted from being the god of life and resurrection to, once the Greeks came in and the Romans, he got shifted to become the god of the underworld associated with Pluto. And then Isis became more associated with life. And that was the decline of the Osirian cult in Egypt. So, yeah. So let's see. In the highest religious seat of Cyprus, Adonis and Aphrodite were worshipped in Pathos on the southwestern side of the island, which Herodotus says was settled by Phoenician colonists from ancient Ascalon in a time of great antiquity. These seafaring folks overlaying Aphrodite, Inanna, Ishtar over the top of the fertility goddess that was there. And then after that was done, then they bring in the demasculated god. So this was always, so it's almost like it's weaponized anthropology, where they bring in this beautiful, loving thing and set up temples to love and pleasure. And then they slide in this demasculated god wearing this Phrygian hat, tied in with all these revolutions through all, coming into Greece, coming into Rome, coming into the French Revolution, and basically cause havoc and overthrow these systems, very much like we saw the Vatican doing.
Speaking of which, what was the first commandment of the Council of Nicaea?
Go ahead.
Do you know? It was
maybe.
The Roman men are no longer allowed to castrate themselves.
Yep.
Because that was a big problem once Christianity took over, is a lot of these people said, if your eye causes you to sin, cut it off.
Right.
And your wiener causes you to sin, Osiris that shit. So
cut it off. Yeah.
They had to say, we're stopping this, because they were having a major population problem. And Origen, one of the church fathers, pure nummo, he cut his own junk off because it caused him to sin. Again, it's the divine madness being translated into a different form in this new dying and rising religion.
Right. And once within the Roman culture, once this happened where you would demasculate yourself, you were considered neither a man nor a woman. Some of the senators went so far as to say they were both men and women, and they needed to take up the responsibility of both. But because of the fact that they were neither man nor women, they basically found themselves laying outside of the law, and Roman law didn't basically affect them, because they were not a man or a woman, which also kept them from being a citizen. But the reason they were allowed to stay in Rome was because Mother Cybele was on Palatine Hill and basically was running all of the other gods, so by that time it was too late. They had already, this Bene Gesserit kind of witch of these oracles that were flowing behind the scenes with these goddesses had already come in and subverted culture and brought in this.
What's going on today? What's going on today? I mean, look, we've got eunuchs all over the place. We just call them something different. They're no longer eunuchs. They're post-op transsexuals.
Yeah, but I think when you look back into the Addis cult, you know, that basically they were doing it as a hieros gamos, basically marrying themselves to the divine, you know, ridding themselves of that for the sake of, like you were saying, ending their sin within the, and it was, you know, like the Quakers and the Shakers in New England, you know, the Shakers specifically believed in not producing more children because you were incarnating more souls into the corruption of the world, which is a constant theme we see going all the way back to the fallen angels, that they, you know, even some of the fallen angels said they were falling into matter to stop the souls from being corrupted into the, you know, the world of sin, basically, you know.
Right. But, you know, from the material perspective, you have families referring to these people who are attracted to people of the same sex with the FGG word that we can't say on YouTube because a bundle of sticks has to be carried, right? And the FGG word is a bundle of
So knocked himself off.
He got cut off, yeah. So Diogenes, a Greek grammarian who flourished during the reign of Hadrian, adds that Adonis had been honored by Aphrodite, the Cyprian, after his death. They cast doves on a pyre to him, and that the birds flying away from the flames fell into another pyre and were consumed. Such a mode of honoring him would be very remarkable, since the doves were commonly sacred to his mistress, the divine Aphrodite or Astarte. Let's see, we're getting pretty close to the end of my notes. So Theocritus, a Greek poet from Sicily in 300 BC, he says, at Alexandria, images of Aphrodite and Adonis were displayed on 2 couches. Beside them were set ripe fruits of all kinds, cakes, plants growing in flower pots, and green bowers twinned with anise. The marriage of the lovers was celebrated one day, and on the morrow, women attired as mourners with streaming hair and bared breasts bore an image of the dead Adonis to the seashore and committed it to the waves. Yet they sorrowed not without hope, for they sang that the lost one would come back again. Philo of Alexandria in 33 AD, he says, for spring and summer, not autumn, are the season of barley and wheat, harvest in the lands of Adonis. Let's see. St. Jerome confirms that Adonis was slain in the month of June and relates that the Syrians gave this month the name Tammuz, and elements of the grave Beth-Ahar. This Beth-Ahar being possibly the daughter of the Pharaoh who pulled Moses out of the Nile. Her grave was in this cave where the Christ child was born, that now he was upset because the women were there mourning for the loss of the bewailed Tammuz, you know. So it's just interesting how all of these, you know, and again, when you go to the Catholic Church and you sit down in the pews, the very first thing that the priest says when he comes out is he says, these are the mysteries of our Lord Jesus Christ. So this is, you know, we're seeing this is very much in the school of these ancient mysteries, you know. So, but a lot of these practices that Jesus said were said to take the place of these blood rituals and these, you know, kind of ending, you know, like how Abraham ended, you know, human sacrifice. Jesus was said to have ended animal sacrifice or any blood sacrifice, essentially, you know, as far as the developing of the human species moving into, I don't know, being more civilized, I guess, you know.
Evolution.
So let's see, from southern Phrygia and moving into Syria, the populace of Antioch being the capital of Seleucia, where they saw the morning evening star in the east as the signal for the festival of marriage, death, and resurrection to begin. Adonis, go ahead.
I said, oh, okay. No, I'm
Uh,
just sorry.
Yeah. So they played a lot of this off the morning star. And the morning star ties a lot into this as well. And you see Jesus in the Bible even relating himself to the morning star. A lot of people say this is where you get that whole theory that Jesus and Lucifer are brothers that you hear some people talk about, you know.
The
twin,
the opposite twin, yeah.
Right. And Thomas, Jesus' twin, you know, Thomas means twin. And it gets into the cult of the twin, associated with Gemini and the struggle, you know. And when you get into the zodiac, what was it? The soul was said to emerge into this reality through Virgo, and it was said to ascend out of this reality through Gemini. So these are the gateways of the zodiac that some of the ancients used to believe the soul would enter into this realm and leave from this realm, you know. And Adonis, who, like the transient state of Linus in Egypt, was a symbol of the death and resurrection, like Osiris, existing in a state of limbo, becoming the reborn Horus. And in the process of lamenting for the dead god, the playing of flutes is mentioned by both Athenaeus and Pollux, who instruct us that the flute and Adonis were both referred to as Gingras. Oh, and this, so you remember the Egyptian story where Set is trying to get Horus to eat the lettuce?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he had to put the semen on him to get the semen on him.
Yeah.
Right. So now Mackie,
that's some nasty shit. I'm sorry, man. When I first
what's up with this shit?
But you figure these
when I first read that shit, bro, I was like, what the fuck did I just read? Yo, did this dude just say he nutted on some leaves and give it to his fucking what the fuck?
So but you figure
I won. Like who the fuck is that with their load?
So now if you look at the fact that these high priests / priestesses of Attis and Adon, they were said to castrate themselves, and then they became sacred prostitutes. So there has been some speculation that it was a harvesting function, that they were collecting this stuff for magical purposes, you know. So but Mackie, as far as the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry, he says that it was lettuce that replaced the acacia in the mysteries of Adonis when translated from Attis. So, you know, within the mysteries of Adonis, this lettuce was, you know, a symbol of an evergreen thing, you know, like a green thing shooting up from the earth. So it was, let's see, let's see. Plutarch, 77 AD, expresses that the images of Adonis were mourned over, were dressed to resemble corpses, and were carried out to Adonis's burial, and then they were thrown in the sea or into springs. And what would you do with seeds? You know, you take the seeds and you soak them in water to get them to sprout before you plant them. So this idea of, you know, again, throwing him into the sea, bathing the black rock, and then Adonis ascends up to heaven in the presence of his worshipers. The disconsolate believers left behind on earth shave their heads, just as the Egyptians did on the death of the divine Apis bull of Osiris. Women who could not bring themselves to sacrifice their beautiful tresses or their hair had to give themselves up to a stranger on a certain day of the festival and dedicate to Astarte the wages of their shame. And this is getting into the, you know, horror of Babylon and that unspoken shame that is kind of reveled in, that is the debaucherous practices of the orgies and the, you know, various things that were going on within certain parts of these mystery schools, right? Church historian Eusebius, 300 AD, recoils with horror in his writing of how the castrated priests of Adonis engaged in sexual congress, most likely being a form of sacred prostitution for a sort of strange donation. So let's see. Ultimately, with this, the resurrection of the God-man, hope would be given to all the worshipers that upon their return in the time of dying would follow the same path, ascending to the heavens into a more pure form of existence than the physical material world had to offer, subsumed in the pure and divine love of the goddess herself as the Magnamator, the Great Mother. So that's Adonis and Aphrodite.
Story time with Roby Marx.
That's that knowledge right there. That's that knowledge, man. I almost went and grabbed some popcorn, man, because I was like, I'm deep in this right now.
It's an epic tale, you know.
We'll get another drink, actually.
I know. But you figure, I mean, that's, you know, piecing together and you know, as far as the research
you leave out too.
Oh, dude, the amount of stuff I leave out is a lot.
Yeah,
because I'm trying to just talk about the key elements, you know.
This is the shit that you're like, I know that's interesting, but nobody else is probably going to care.
I know. So even a couple of things I'd left in there, I was like, it's still interesting to me. So yeah.
Okay, right? Yeah.
But it gives you a more complete sense of the story that we're talking about. That, you know, like we talked about Addis last time, and this time, you know, Adonis. We talked about Nimrod in relation to Egyptians, you know, symbology on one of the first shows we did together way back, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But
yeah,
it was great.
Fun stuff.
Oh yeah, that was awesome. Too bad about Hellas.
I know.
You're not making it back, but Robbie, that was awesome. Thank you very much. Was there anything else you wanted to add, or I guess I'm pretty good with that, right?
I mean, I could go on about this stuff, you know, for,
yeah,
however long. It's just all very intriguing and, you know, mind blowing. It's like so much like, I mean, constantly when I'm going through these books, you know, you're just having your mind changed and moved and blown, and like your understandings increase, and especially when you can start to take these different elements and bring them together to kind of show a bigger picture of what's, because, you know, all this stuff of the sacred mysteries and is something that nobody really talks about in full. You only get pieces and snippets of it from all these different books. So taking them all and kind of bringing them, you know, and making sense out of them. And as you're going through it, once you have enough of these notes, you're really like, wow, there's a full, you know, story here that is just not discussed, you know.
You know what I find interesting is that I mean, I know people have been saying this for a while, like, you know, if you start looking at it like what you were doing, you'll show how the story repeats in different cultures and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
You know, if you look at, I mean, not that I'm pushing the guy's stuff for any reason besides I just think it's actually a good way to look at it. Even if you take Crowley 777,
yep,
and you look at the way he was showing you in that book, he's showing you that these things all align.
Oh yeah,
and that's what all those graphs are in there, is showing matching up with each other.
Yep. And he talks also within the Typhonian mysteries, you know, Kenneth Grant, but Crowley specifically, I think it was in the Book of the Law, he talks about Set as being the number 8, as the hidden one in the dog star. And the dog star is 7-pointed, you know, as far as Isis is the 7-pointed star of the goddess. And if you add the center point, which was the sun behind the sun, when the dog days of summer, when Sirius was behind the sun, right? That 7th point, or that 8th point inside the 7-pointed star, is Set. He is, you know, the black sun. He is the sun behind the sun, you know. So but he's also number 8. So, you know, Crowley gets into this stuff extensively, you know, if you can understand the keywords and the references, you know.
Yeah, that's another thing too. Yeah. you'd actually have to probably read the introduction and like the whole beginning of it, and then look at the graph to even understand what he's doing with the graphs. But,
Yeah.
yeah. But well, what I'm getting at is that like if you could actually look at somebody looked at that book and understood the graphs, it's like that is even showing you right there. Back then, they had people saying all this shit
Yeah.
all lines up and is all fucking
Right.
repeat, equals the same shit.
Right. Well, and that book 777, when you get into all those charts and, you know, you're matching mineral for herb, for metal, for all these things are basically,
Drugs.
well, yeah, but the way you draw together the elements to do a magical working in regard to sympathetic magic to summon whatever the spirit that those are related to, so that you can have all the elements associated with it to give it the familiar vibration to enter into, you know?
Oh yeah. It goes into way in depth. If you,
Yeah.
that's like you know, if people were doing rituals, that's like a Bible full of ritual construction.
I know.
Yeah.
I even go through it and look at the color patterns and what they relate to, and
that makes
the
sense.
art, with the art. Yeah, you know.
Even if you think about it, the way talismans are expected to be designed with the flashing colors, that all makes sense for an artist to use because that's making the colors pop.
Right. Well, and it's also playing with the cones and the rods in your eye and working them against each other, and that's why psychedelic art works the way it does, because the red waveform is very violent. It's fast, so it pushes towards you more, whereas the blue waveform is slower, so it sets back. So when you look at the contrast of red and blue next to each other, the red is coming out and the blue is pushed away, and it creates an optical effect. And these are ways to play with the cones and the rods, and
and I think there's actually more rods. There's more red than there is blue. Yeah.
Well, and red light is supposed to be very healing for the mitochondria, as far as, you know. And when you shut your eyes,
wait, say that again. Which color?
Red, the red light spectrum.
Shit,
There's a certain.
That's so funny. It's so funny you say that, because I have red LED lights and I feel different when I turn those on versus the blue ones.
Light
like,
therapy.
I really do feel different. Yeah, I really do. Like,
yeah.
It's crazy that you say that, because I use it mostly when I'm trying to calm down. I don't know if that's what it's supposed to do, but it helps me calm down in a sense. And as you can see, I have my PC here. You can see the little light right here. I have blue, so I switch from blue to red to green, because each one of them has their own thing. So I turn off all the lights. I turn off all the lights, and I'll, start reading my book, and I'll have my LED lights and these lights right here. And sometimes you'll notice, and it's so funny you brought that up, because somebody said, "Hey, Rebirth is sleeping." On my keyboard right here, I have the same thing. It's color coded. And I sometimes, when I'm really in deep thought, I can change the colors on here and
put it actually, on, enhance the mental state.
Yes, exactly. See, I'm glad you said it, because on my keyboard, that's exactly what I do. I can change it to green, to blue, to yellow. I like yellow because I'm a Simpsons fan, and I learned that yellow, they use the color to attract people to their show. So when they're flipping through their channels real fast, they see the yellow, they automatically know. So man, I'm telling you, man, you got some knowledge on you, bro. I'm gonna have to get you on my show and talk to you, man. You own it, man. I said it from the beginning, bro. I see a lot of grays right there. There's a lot of wisdom over there.
It's funny.
Nice.
But what was I gonna say about we were talking about the cones and stuff in the eyes. There's a strength, I think it's a strength Golden Dawn tarot card. That the first, if you ever, maybe Robbie, you've looked at it. If you look at what these things look like under a microscope, they almost look like blades of grass or like blades of fucking rugs, like a shag carpet or something. And
they wave.
And there was I think on the strength card there was like 3 different lions or something, and like as whichever one had more cones, I think there was more red than blue. It was like red, green, and blue. The lions went in the. I mean, it could be just coincident, but the bigger lion was red, the medium lion, and then the blue lion was the smallest one. And I was like, you know how I look at some tarot cards and wonder if there's bullshit in there. When I came across that, I was like, yo, that's exactly the same amount.
Distribution of the code.
It's weird to me.
Yeah, the temple of the body. It's how much as above, so below, extracting from in what do they say? The entire cosmos is inside of you. Yeah.
for sure. But
So you know what oh, I'm sorry.
no, go
No,
ahead.
go
I
ahead.
was going to ask if anybody had
So I
anything
was
to
just
say.
looking up the color red because I never really paid attention until you guys were actually talking about it. And I looked up the color red, and my passion is history, learning and gaining research, or learning and doing research and sharing what I've learned and all that. Red is associated with passion and love. Well, I knew about the love part, but it's associated with passion. And that's probably why I feel so calm when I'm around people who are knowledgeable on the subject, and I'm with the color red, because it helps me like kind of calm down and relax.
Right.
It helps me like focus more. So I really do appreciate you giving me that information, because I didn't know that before. I always just thought it was just like, man, maybe it's just a phase or something. I didn't know, like, I knew about green. I knew about yellow. I know about blue, but I never really looked into red.
Right.
Really, it's not even a color that I really liked at first or anything.
From what I've seen, red, there's a certain spectrum of red light that basically encourages the mitochondria to heal itself. And you know, when you get into sun gazing and looking at, you know, the various, then you have the full spectrum, you know, the golden rays, and as the sun shifts through the various tones, as you know, Lord Ra enters into the underworld, it's basically all these healing waveforms, and then you have your circadian rhythm. But even when you get into these beams of light and using light for healing, you know, the Vatican has a painting of Jesus, and he's literally holding crystals, doing like Reiki work. You know, and when you get these minerals and you shine the sun through them in a certain way, you're getting the energizing power of the sun, putting it into a certain spectrum, and then focusing that color spectrum on the area, you know. So there's some truths in these ancient, you know, Hyperborean kind of technologies that have been lost to modern man. You know, light, waveform, frequency, sound, kind of, you know, these telluric energies of the earth. And yeah, it gets deep, man.
Yes, it does. All right. I think we'll wrap it.
I ain't getting out this shit.
Tyrone, real quick, let everybody know where they can find all your stuff.
I appreciate this, Nick, man. Like I said, man, I tell Nick this every time. I am so glad that I'm part of the team, because I'm surrounded by people that have knowledge, and I'm glad that I'm receiving it the way I am. So it took a long time to get there, but hey, I did it. When I first started off, everything you can find on me is on my website, rebirthoftheword.com. I started off with the website and became a bestseller. You can find my book, Journey Through the Origins of History, right on Amazon. Thanks again. I appreciate it.
Oh, of course, Tyrone. Always appreciate you jumping on, my man. For real. And, you know, real quick, I'll plug Headless. He's not here. Headless Giant podcast at gmail.com. You can send him stories, any weird dreams or any, like, I guess, you know, paranormal or real stories in life. And if you send that over, you want to throw him your address, or just, you know, I guess send me the address and him the email, but that's stupid. Just send it all at one or whatever. And he'll get me the address, and I'll send you out some free stickers. So yeah, Headless Giant, check him out. He's also got every Sunday he's got the Trialogue. Check that out. He's got that going on this Sunday. And finally, Roby Marx, thank you so much, man, for coming on. Always love having you on. It's always a story time with Roby Marx, and you did it once again. So please let everybody know where they can find all your other stuff and your amazing art.
For sure. Yeah, if you want to check out all my other stuff, you can go to my Linktree, which is Linktree RMARX, and that'll pull up my various art that I do. It'll pull up the podcast, the Meta Mindcast, if you want to go check that out. I also have my Patreon on there if you want to give back. But I always encourage you to go check either out my website or my Etsy, and if you like anything there, that's a great way to support me as well, you know.
Oh yeah, go check his stuff out. And real quick, I'll take a few. I made it as two, maybe. Just to plug these places that we're going to. I keep forgetting. I gotta remember. So bringing this up at the beginning of the show, because at this point everybody's shutting the shit off, especially on the audio. There are events that I'm going to be going to, and Tyrone will be there as well for probably almost all of them except for one. October 4th, we got Bigfoot thing going on, and that's at the factory in Franklin, North Carolina. And then October 18th, we got Charlie's Beyond Belief, and that is again in Fort Myers, Florida, at a Masonic lodge. And I always got to tell everybody we got booth 33. What the fuck is up? Yeah. We got Arkansas. I think that's the one Tyrone won't be making it to. I'll be out there. That is October 25th to 26th. That's a paranormal expo. It's supposed to be like the biggest annual thing in Arkansas for paranormal stuff. So they offered me the booth for free if I was to promote it. So I said, fuck yeah, I'll go down there and meet some people, say some weird shit. Yeah, November 22nd, then we'll also be at Mooresville, North Carolina. That's a UFO thing. And yeah, that's places that are finalized for now that I feel good enough talking about. And again, for Charlie's Beyond Belief, I forgot to mention Brooke from Dark, Florida, who's part of the Occult Rejects, will be one of the speakers there. So if you're in the area, definitely come down and check it out. It should be really cool. She's also got a booth. She's got friends there that has got a booth. So the little area we're in should be on and popping. So come and check it out. And that's enough out of me. And again, thank you everybody who came on the show. Tyrone, thank you. Headless, Robbie, that's what's up. Everybody in the chat, that is what's up. I appreciate it. Even the people on the other platforms. I see you on Twitter and I see the other people on the other YouTube platforms. I appreciate the comments. And that is why we go live. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.